Try that.
Suiting up to fight a dangerous adversary. Fighting the G's, the powerful force of gravity.
1, 2, 3, out.
Flying faster, higher, safer. A mock dogfight at 200 miles an hour. But the co-pilots of these Marchetti trainers are merely would-be warriors.
You want to feel 6 Gs?
They are the John F. Kennedys, though they're actually Canadian. John Sr. is a London, Ontario truck driver, and John Jr., an ultralight pilot and instructor.
Okay, you see him out there, John? We're going to let him get away.
These days, anyone with the cash and the stomach can live out this Top Gun fantasy. What they're really doing is fighting the G's. As we'll see, the G-force is both a huge concern and a huge thrill.
It was wonderful. Wonderful. Just, I'm coming back. That's all there is to it. Woo! Holy moly.
I'll take that for you.
He's a G monster. He's a G monster.
G meaning the gravitational force caused by high-speed acceleration and sharp turns. But it's not something only found in flight. Take a ride on the roller coaster and you'll feel the force of gravity. At the speedway, those hairpin turns increase the force of gravity. Almost everyone has felt the G-force.
If you get up out of bed really quickly, you go from 0 G to 1 G. You're back to normal gravity as you stand up. And many people will have experienced a loss of vision as they get out of bed really quickly. Well, that's gray out. That's the same kind of gray out that a fighter pilot would feel under a high G loading. And in fact, some people who respond to this might even pass out or black out.
Head of research is Lieutenant Colonel Bob Banks. He's an engineer, a pilot, and a practicing medical doctor.
Right?
A little too high a pressure for a human subject.
Yeah, so we're going to, this is a destruction test, is it? Or hopefully.
He's part of DCIEM, the Defense and Civil Institute of Environmental Medicine, a research and development lab that invents protective devices for the military. Few people know more about G-forces than Bob Banks.
Is this the one you're making for me? Yeah, as we sit here, we live under 1 G, 1 gravity, 1 force of gravity. As that changes, really you can multiply that force so that it's 2 G or 3 G or more G, so that if you had, say, a 10-pound weight in your hand, at 1 G, that 10-pound weight would weigh 10 pounds. At 2 G, it would weigh double that. It would weigh 20 pounds. When an aircraft flies, or when it turns, it gets into a position where the aircraft, as it turns, is like being on the end of a pendulum. It goes around and it turns around, and a pilot who is in that aircraft, as he turns a corner, because of the high speed of an aircraft, is pushed down. And he can be pushed down multiples of G. So at 2 G, that 10-pound weight would then weigh 20 pounds.
The aim is to improve ways of protecting the body during force of gravity increases. The centrifuge can generate 15 Gs. Most pilots, when relaxed, can briefly take 5.5.
Doc, you all set? Yep.
As the body is subjected to G, as a pilot, for instance, makes a sharp bank turn, the force of the gravity makes the weight of the blood, just going back to that 10-pound weight that now weighs 20 pounds, well, looking at the weight of the blood inside the body, it now weighs double its weight. And because of the elasticity, of the elastic properties in the lower body, in the legs and abdomen, what will happen is as the pilot is subjected to G, the blood will stretch the tissues in the lower part of the body and will accumulate down there. So eventually it pulls the blood out of the upper part of the body and into the lower part of the body, and eventually there won't be enough blood left in the eyes, so you lose your vision, or in the brain, so that you lose consciousness. And it's like a faint.
You all set?
To fight loss of consciousness, pilots are taught to strain against the G-force, to strain on their muscles in the lower body, so as to push the blood to the top, to the brain.
That looks real good, Mike. Good. Good air volume. Good movement. Oh, Mike.
The frightening thing about that loss of consciousness is that when you wake up, you may have no memory of having lost it. So we wonder some days about how many pilots have lost consciousness in the air and never even known it.
Though little has been reported, there is an urgency to this research, as Colonel Banks discloses.
It is a major cause of aircraft loss in this country, in our fighter environment, and in other countries. It doesn't happen every week, certainly, but every few years there will be an aircraft lost, very expensive aircraft lost, and often a life.
You're okay, Mario.
So we know that it goes on, we know that it happens, and it concerns us.
Just don't move your head. Spinning around the center, please.
So can today's pilots cope? For instance, truck driver John Kennedy. He shares an ever more popular passion to fly higher, faster.
The flying itself is a real high. I love going up in the air because it's just, you're just on a high.
Kennedy's hobby is his ultralight, but now, just once, he wants to experience high flight. He has read about Air Combat USA, which offers warbird flights by the hour. For a few $100s each, Kennedy and his son can rent the heavens.
270 miles an hour.
John Kennedy Jr. is also a pilot, but though he teaches flying ultralight aircraft, he finds Southern Ontario life a little too pastoral at times.
Air Combat USA was my dad's idea, and I went along with it because, well, you know, I like to have a thrill just like the next person, I guess. To me, I think it's kind of like laser tag at 200 miles an hour in a three-dimensional arena, and I like the three-dimensional arena and anything to do with flying, basically.
I heard about it in the spring this year, and it was Alan Peck and his boy were up there having a ball, so I figured it'd be good enough for me and my boy, so we're going to go down to Genesee and try it.
Their destination is Genesee County Airport outside Buffalo, New York, where Air Combat USA is making the circuit. Here the Kennedys will join two former American fighter pilots for the ride of their life. Even the anticipation has them pumped up.
Well, where's our planes?
I built an ultralight Murphy Renegade, and it cruises approximately 75 to 80 mile an hour. And I'm going into a Marchetti that will cruise approximately 200, 230.
Did you hear what he said over
Yeah,
there?
I heard what he said.
5 Gs for a long time. Let's see now, that'd make me about 1,000 pounds. I think.
Yeah.
Right. Have a seat there. Go ahead and put your stuff back there on those back chairs.
Well, I'm sure we're going to feel some Gs. I imagine we might even be a little sore after the flight because of the Gs we're going to be pulling. But I don't expect we'll be pulling any more than about 4 Gs. Although I heard some pretty good grunting coming out of a pilot on the tape that I saw from those fellas in the fighter planes.
Then we'll go ahead and fly some formation on the way out.
Just a grunting and a groaning.
Once we get out to the working area, we'll do a gun sight tracking exercise, low and high yo-yo exercise. Then we'll get into the engagements. Once the engagements are complete, if you guys are feeling up to it or want to do it, we'll do some aerobatics. Let's talk about G's. We said that when we pull back on the stick, we're going to feel some G's. All right? The airplane's capable of 6 G's out there. Now, the average person just sitting there can do 3 to 4 G's without doing a thing. That's just the resting body. Our fights are usually in the 2 to 4 G regime, so 50% of our customers don't ever have a problem. It's the aggressive ones that go out to 5 and 6 G's, and the ones that get maybe into a sustained 4G fight that are going to feel that.
Looks like they're going away now.
Okay. Now you can see Buffalo out there to the right.
And Burley down. Overhead, head down, wind 32.
What we're going to do is get a set up behind us and roll back to the left for me.
Okay, we're getting our separation for the first fight. You got a game plan?
And, hey, we're tired of waiting on you.
Okay, so when we pass, left to left, I want you to roll to the left and pull back on the stick, okay? I'll talk you through it. All right, here we
Look
go.
out here.
All righty.
See him down there? Doing a low yo-yo, and watch this. That's the high yo-yo. Gotta get our nose down to get some airspeed. There you go. Look at, he's way down there. I got him. Not looking too bad.
There we got it. Roll right and push. Push, don't pull. Roll right.
The air combat pilots hand over the controls at 30,000 feet. John Sr. has his son in his gun sight and goes in for the kill.
We are coming off the left. First time I ever filmed my own smoke. High five. Woo! All right, we're stunning him.
Good job. What we'll do is we'll fly them, get a little altitude, we'll do some aerobatics, okay? We're just gonna hang on the prop. That's all we're doing. There's 4.5 G's. Real slow, and up around we flop. Now, you want to feel 6 G's?
More, now stick all the way left. Way over there. This is an aileron roll. See how the world kind of goes around? All right.
How you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. How you like this? Fun. Pretty fun. You used to that. Yeah.
I don't know who got each other, who got who's the most, but...
That was great.
That was something else,
Like
wasn't
that? Oh, yeah, we're coming back.
Oh, yeah.
The air combat package includes an in-flight video of the Kennedy's dogfight, plus a debrief from the pilots.
Around over there.
Well, that was the first time I ever filmed my own smoke.
Oh, look at that. Look at those hand gestures. I can't believe that.
That's not fair. Who said dogfighting had to be fair? Right.
Good friend, we're coming at you.
When I felt the G-force, it was just something that pushed you back in the seat and just a little heavy, but it pinched your, felt like it squashed your face right in. That's what it, that was the biggest feeling. It was just that your skin on your face just felt like it went tight. That's all.
How is it John Kennedy Sr. could take up to 6 Gs and not pass out? We asked him to undergo a controlled test with Bob Banks in a scientific environment like the centrifuge. Here he finds he can't take as many Gs.
Hold. Are you ready to go to 2.5? Sure. All right, you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
Dan.
Let's
Dan,
do it.
it's in charge. And you're going to feel a pitch left sensation coming up. Okay, Ray, hold. Hold. Okay, John, how do you feel?
Sit squashed down in this seat, I'm telling you.
Okay, just lift your right arm up. See how it feels. Actually, lift your left arm, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Does that ever feel different, huh?
How about your left leg? Just lift your knee up.
Yeah, sure.
Because you're... Okay, we're going to take you down now.
It was intense. It was there all the time. Like, it wasn't like the airplane. The airplane was, oh, you had it for a second, it was gone. This, it was there. You had it continuous.
The difference between a fighter aircraft and a small aircraft is that a fighter aircraft has the power to sustain the G's. An aerobatic aircraft, for instance, would pull 8G or 9G and sustain it for only a couple of seconds before that G would start to bleed off. An F-18 fighter could sustain 7 or 8 or 9G, 20 seconds perhaps, 25 seconds. And if the aircraft was in a dive, what we call a spiral dive, it could sustain that indefinitely. And that's a danger to the pilot.
Next, the dangers of sustained high-speed gravitational pull in military and other jets. The CF-18 Hornet is Canada's leading high-performance fighter and attack aircraft. Each of its engines has 16,000 pounds of thrust. At top speed, a pilot can reach Mach 2. That's almost 2,000 kilometers an hour. With pilots flying twice the speed of sound, Bob Banks takes his job very seriously.
I'm a physician and I'm concerned about my patients and I'm concerned about preventive medicine, and this is a form of preventive medicine. I spent 20 years in flying and I've lost many friends, and some of them because of this problem. So I have, I suppose, an emotional as well as intellectual need to solve these problems.
It's a problem that first got attention just before the onset of the Second World War.
Pilots knew that in some flight conditions, when they turned their aircraft quickly, that they would lose their vision and occasionally they would lose consciousness. Pilots were generally ignorant of the problem and how to prevent it. We have heard that the German Stuka pilots designed a system where they could recline the seat back during their dive recoveries to protect them from G. Very little was still known, and Frederick Banting in 1938 understood that a war was about to come. He really forecast it, and he went to the professors of his department at the University of Toronto, the Banting Institute of Medical Research at Toronto, and he warned them that war was about to happen and that there was a need to study topics related to medicine of the air or aviation medicine. He had a professor who worked for him named Wilbur Franks.
Dr. Wilbur R. Franks was known for his work at the University of Toronto in cancer research.
He went up to Camp Borden as a newly commissioned lieutenant very early in the war and did some initial studies in a Fleet Finch. Flew this aircraft, had some photographs made, studied the problem, came down and became convinced that the only way to solve this problem was to study it in a laboratory.
The lab was located in a residential area, and even the military wasn't sure what went on here.
The building itself is squat, nondescript, very few windows, and it was closely guarded. And to get to that building would have been a major feat during the war because it was top secret.
What they found was that at 4.5 G, the pilot's vision would start to fade like glasses misting. As the G's increased, the pilots would lose total sight, but remain aware of their surroundings. Past 5.5 G, there wasn't enough oxygen flowing to the brain, and the pilots would lose consciousness. Hundreds of Canadian and Allied airmen were tested.
They learned the lessons of fluid settling in the body. They learned what made people pass out in the air, what made them lose the vision. They were able to explain all of that in terms that allowed them to design systems that would protect people against that sort of thing.
The earliest design was an all-rubber suit called the Zoot suit. Water was pumped into the rubber lining, adding pressure, which helped to keep the pilot's blood in the top half of his body. A good idea, but...
The pilots had a real problem with this G-suit because of its weight. Now, they could empty the water out of it when they wanted to walk around, that was okay, and fill it up when they went flying, but really it was unacceptable to them. And we found out over the years that if the pilots don't accept the product, there's no point in trying to convince them. It was ungainly, hard to get into, and it weighed a lot, and they didn't like it.
They eventually settled on this conventional lace-up version.
Wilbur Franks went on to successive versions of his suit, which was called the Franks Flying Suit. And by the time he got to the third version, the Mark III version, it was ready to go into combat. The Franks suit did see combat, and in fact was the first operational G suit that went into combat. Dr. Frederick Banting and Wilbur Franks and the people that worked with those gentlemen are heroes for us. They really led the way, the science, and we follow along in their footsteps. The American approach, as it evolved, was to go towards air-filled suits. And eventually, Dr. Franks went to adapted his garment to an air-filled suit.
That zoot suit is now a certified military museum artifact. DCIEM develops suits of every kind, but making the perfect G suit remains a challenge.
The Wilbur Franks Mark VI G suit was made in 1944, and it really represents the basic design that we see today in our G suits. The modern G suit that really came into maturity in the 1980s really looks very similar. It has patches missing in the same place, the same sort of coverage. And really, even though the 1944 G suit protected pilots flying Spitfires, this same technology has been applied to pilots that have to fly F-18s. And that concerns us, because in 50 years, while we've gone from the Spitfire to the F-18, we really haven't gone a long way in terms of human protection. So we're not at the end of this science. We really are in the middle-aged part of it, and we have some maturing to do yet. And we are now building a new suit called the Sting suit, which we'll be deploying in our F-18 pilots over the next year. And it will represent a leap forward in overall protection for pilots.
Sting means sustained tolerance and increased G. Potentially, it represents the most important leap forward in pilot protection, military and civilian, since the war years. Ann Lindy's isn't even a pilot, and she's been in the Sting suit hundreds of times. She's a graduate student who volunteers as a guinea pig for the centrifuge.
Launch.
Good. PLL and CLL.
Was the suit inflated there?
Yeah. When I was at 6'4", I lost complete vision, so I was completely blacked out. There's just, there's nothing, no light at all. Lights out. Yeah, so it's the first time you do it, it's a little bit unnerving.
For proper K.
The research on Sting is complete, and Bob Banks is ready to take it to its next stage.
We've tested it in the centrifuge, thousands of runs, and today, in fact, it's a happy day for us. We have test pilots from our test establishment in Cold Lake who have arrived to begin training on the Sting suit, and they'll really start the new chapter of Canadian research in this area.
All the lab work in the world doesn't matter unless test pilot Major Lee Obst approves. Next, Major Obst tries out the Sting for the first time. CF-18 Hornet is a highly versatile fighter jet in air-to-air or air-to-ground combat. It packs multi-weapons, everything from cluster bombs to rockets. The Canadian Air Force began acquiring the U.S.-built CF-18 in 1982 and currently has 80 of them after 14 crashes. These losses add urgency to G-force research.
The engineers have built aircraft that can sustain a lot of G. And eventually, with enough G, the wings will fall off. The engineers have built it so well that we never see that happen. But the weak link in the equation is the human, because the aircraft in many ways is stronger than the human. The human will lose consciousness before the aircraft falls apart. And we want to change that so that the human can reliably go to the edge of that engineering design so that he can do what the engineers meant the aircraft to do, and he can be protected while he's doing it. And the Sting suit will allow the pilot to reach the edge of that flight envelope more reliably without being afraid of being hurt.
So what makes the Sting suit different?
The coverage in the lower legs is extended, and we've also got the upper jerkin with air that ports in through two sources, near this regulator for the upper part of it, and the lower G pants through this port here. The upper port is what really makes this different from the older G suits. The air, as you can see, comes in through this valve, and it goes out through two tubes, one into the jerkin that inflates, and the other one into the pilot's oxygen mask, which inflates the pilot's lungs. So the pilot's lungs are inflated, they're countered by pressure on the outside, and overall the G tolerance is enhanced greatly.
Major Lee Obst is the chief test pilot on the project. It's his job to make sure any new improvements made here at the research center are in reality safe and make for easy handling in the air. The new Sting for which he's being fitted is custom made because fit is crucial.
Okay, look at this here. Do you have the comfort zipper? Make sure everything's okay. Turn around a bit. Okay.
First, it must be snug. A pilot's space in the CF-18 is limited, especially when he's wearing his cold weather gear.
Is it too tight?
No,
feels good.
Snug.
Okay, that's what it should be.
It'd be much better if you could lengthen that zipper. Make it easier fitting, get it on quicker and easier. It's just a little tight trying to pull up.
Yeah, we're going to extend it 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches.
That would be much better.
We'll put all those changes on paper and then we can have them for the next production of G-suit.
Just want to try to do that.
Even more important is the fit of the face mask. Sting scientist Dr. Fred Buick and Captain Dan Bayer are anxious for Major Obst to have a good opinion of Sting.
Pressure breathing sort of reverses the process of breathing. Normally, when you're breathing in, it's an active inspiration.
It's almost like the mask is plugged, like I just...
It's going to feel that way, yeah.
Just can't exhale at all.
So way to do it is to
exhalation
change your thinking around, let yourself be inflated, and when you think it's time to breathe out, then you're going to have to push. You have to overcome that pressure and force for the exhale.
Okay. Okay. I got a few breaths. It is quite hard to exhale against it, but it's, still got it. You really get that feeling that you're just, filling up. Cheeks are all filling up.
Okay, that's it. Let's go down the centrifuge.
All right, let's go. Okay.
As we get to around 2G, the G valve is going to begin to inflate the anti-G suit. So you're going to feel some pressure in there. The G is going to continue to increase at around 3 or 3.5 G. There's going to be a pressure signal going from the G suit to the breathing regulator. And when that pressure is sensed, that breathing regulator is going to give you positive pressure breathing. So you're getting a positive pressure in the mask. You're going to feel pressure inside the chest. You're going to have pressure around the chest. It's going to feel the same way as the pressure you had upstairs in the laboratory. Okay, mask on.
Ready. 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 Safety's clear. Tape's rolling.
Okay, countdown commencing. 3, 2, 1, launch.
Launch. Going to 2G in 3, 2, 1, launch.
Okay, remember on this profile, you will have to do an EGA GSM.
Yep.
So overhead tracking then.
And we're at
Loaded.
2G.
You ready to travel?
I'm ready.
My count then. 3, 2, 1, launch.
Launch.
Out. 1. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3. Out. 1, 2, 3. Out. Okay, that's good.
Down.
You're on your way down. And you can roll out.
Baseline.
All right, sir. Good run.
How do you feel about the protection that you were given?
Yeah, it's definitely much better. Big improvement. The breathing thing will take a lot to get used to. The talking under pressure breathing will take a lot to get used to. And you can definitely feel a little bit of soreness in the back of the throat even already. Just getting, again, used to the exhaling under force. I'm a believer that in the simulator, or in the centrifuge, is a definite asset. I'm anxious to see it in the airplane.
So are we, Lee. So are we.
Cold Lake, 300 miles northeast of Edmonton, Canada's largest fighter base. This flat and empty land is an ideal training ground for fighter pilots and home to one of the biggest fighter weapon ranges in the world. It's also the home of AETE, the Aerospace Engineering Test Establishment. Here, Major Obst has spent 3 months putting Sting through its paces to decide airworthiness.
Anytime there's a structural change or an avionics change or a software change or new systems added to existing aircraft, or on occasions when we purchase new aircraft, AT will do the evaluations on those systems to make sure that they're airworthy, safe to operate, and meet the operational requirements.
Bob Banks and his staff of scientists are anxious to have the Sting suit approved. Other governments, including those of Australia, the United States, and several European countries, are interested in the Sting. But Major Obst won't be hurried.
The Sting suit's gone through like a whole series of what we call phase 1, if you will, or ground testing, ground evaluation. What we're looking for mainly is compatibility with the existing equipment in the cockpit. And to do that, we use the various tools, one of them being the simulator, which we use as a cockpit. It's an exact replica of an F-18 cockpit, but obviously not the expense of going into flight trials or the hazards. So we use the simulator to check for things like, can we reach all the critical switches and functions? Can we run through all the emergency drills and see all the instrumentation and cues and so on? Are there any obstructions to vision or action because of the new connections and the number of hoses that have been added with the Sting suit? And an assessment of can we still have the same freedom of movement and visibility within the cockpit? So things like critical egress, to be able to get out of the aircraft in an emergency situation, clearance to make sure that if we had to, in the event, to eject from the aircraft, that we wouldn't have any problems with the equipment. We've also used a parachute harness where we suspend the pilot from the harness to simulate an post-ejection situation. There's a number of drills we have to get to make sure our emergency equipment is properly deployed. And we've recommended a number of modifications to the way the equipment is hooked up, such as changing the way some of these connections are done to shorten the connections, to reduce the amount of hosing or tubing, to reduce long connections like this to smaller, quick disconnect. Again, so it's ease of pilot both getting into the aircraft in normal conditions, but also in an emergency condition.
That deploys my seat pack.
The other one that we did was an evaluation of the survival equipment should we land in water after an ejection. So to do that, we went into the swimming pool on base here with the full Sting suit inflated and the parachute harness, jumped into the pool and evaluated that, yes, we can get out of the harness after water entry if we had to. The automatic inflation devices not only work, but keep the pilot afloat as they're designed to, and the pilot can still maneuver and be able to get into his life raft.
In the military, the Sting may help balance the performance, pilot, and plane. And eventually, it may portend an entirely new kind of jet set. Next, how you could pilot these super jets. The MiG-29, one of the most powerful jet fighters in the world and the pride of the Russian fleet. And these days, improbably, North Americans are flying it here at the Zhukovsky Air Base outside of Moscow. 10 years ago, it was top secret. But with capitalist opportunity everywhere, times have changed. The Russian Air Force has gone into business with an American entrepreneur to sell well-heeled North Americans fantasy trips on Russian aircraft. A Czech-built L-39. It's what the Russian aerobatic team flies. Yours for $1,200 for a 30-minute spin. And the MiG, $8,500 for 40 minutes. Even the Moscow facility where the cosmonauts train has become a playground. These are North American tourists paying for an hour of pure, weightless joy. When Toronto businessman Tony Hamblin heard that he could fly a Russian MiG, he leapt at the chance. Hamblin is an investment broker, but his passion is flying wild. He's been a pilot since he was a teenager, and only a hearing problem kept him from becoming an Air Force pilot.
Very, very few people have the opportunity to sit in them, let alone to fly in them, and to experience doing aerobatics in these, to experience the power and the precision with which they can be flown, and the speed to go supersonic, to go to the altitude, to do low-level flying, was all very much on our minds. Each one develops over 18,000 pounds of thrust, which enables it to produce some incredible maneuvers.
Tony Hamblin took his sons, Drew and Jeff, as a back-to-university present. Like Dad, they're both pilots.
Yeah, I've always been in aviation, and I made models when I was a kid, like tons of models. And I even have my rug upstairs in my bedrooms of an F-15 etched within. And my father, it's been in the family blood. My grandfather flew Tiger Moths. My father's been flying since he was 18, and he got me started. And he called me up, asked me, he said, "How would you like to go to Russia?" I'm like, "Well, sure, I'd love to go on a trip anytime." He says, "Well, how would you like to fly MiGs?" And my initial reaction is, my jaw drops, and I'm saying, "Okay, sure."
Do you have license?
Yes.
Flightpath?
Yes.
Give me please.
A quick check to make sure they're pilots, and a token physical examination was all it took.
Airspeed in kilometers per hour, altitude in meters.
It didn't even register I was in the MiG at this point. I was just trying to guess what the sensation would be like.
Rate of climb and descent.
What about now,
It doesn't even come close to what you experience in the L-39. It's exponential. You get power like you would not believe. You feel like you can do anything in this aircraft, and you almost literally can. We did a full afterburner takeoff, and then went back up again, straight up. He cut the engines off and performed a maneuver which is called the tail slide. It was just an unbelievable experience. You're going straight up in the air, and I can remember we're almost going into the clouds, and then he eases up, and it's almost a weightlessness experience.
Soviet airspace is virtually unregulated, which meant Drew could fly across towns at 50 meters or zoom to 50,000 feet. The Russian military aircraft come in about 20 different packages, everything from $1,200 for the basic to $20,000 for the deluxe, a ride of a lifetime.
And the sky's all black, and we were like weightlessness up there, 5 Gs, and my eyes are like, I didn't get a facelift after this. Oh, unbelievable.
3 months later, the Hamlins are still awestruck about flying fighter jets in Russia.
In a way, I guess we were able to participate in that. Did we do it for bonding? Did we do it to get closer? And the answer is no. We just did it because we thought it would be a great thing to do. Demonstrated at many Western air shows. We just went and had a good time and did what we wanted to do and came home, and we'll remember it for all our lives. It was a great experience.
It's absolutely one of the most incredible experiences I've had in my life. I mean, I'm just a university student. Here I am flying these Russian Air Force jets. Something I'll remember for the rest of my life.
There's some days where I just try to recreate the whole experience.
Oh, so this is in the trainer?
Yeah, I think the only thing that really could beat this was if you were able to go up in outer space. If they did invent a space shuttle for personal use or anything remotely close to that, I think the Hamlin family would be at least in the top 10 people in line for that.
I'd definitely be on the space shuttle if they came up with that. Passenger flight, you could count me in. I would definitely top it.
4, 3, start and check engines, launch and flight.
The Hamlin boys may get their wish sooner than they expect. Both NASA and private industry are working on a reusable launch vehicle that could act as a space ferry, carrying cargo and civilians to Earth's satellite stations. NASA predicts commercial use by the year 2010. It means that these early paying customers may get to experience the weightlessness and gravity pull of actual space travel.
So I don't think you'll ever see everybody accessing space. Physically, I think ethically, we would not be putting people into the situation because we need to have some form of protection for them and say, hey, look what's going to happen to you if we let you fly.
Dr. Roberta Bondar, one of the first women in space. On the Space Shuttle Discovery, she performed life science experiments. Currently, Dr. Bondar is conducting research into blood flow in the brain during weightlessness, or zero G.
There are two sides of the coin. One are the G-forces on launch and re-entry. The second is actually being without acceleration forces in terms of being in a microgravity state, which is in free fall around the Earth, which is floating. And I think that the floating part of it is just as bad or difficult on the human body as the acceleration going up there. Only the physically fit will have a good crack at it right now. We could probably go to Mars, develop the technology to go there far earlier than we'll be able to develop the understanding of how it's going to affect us in terms of our health. You know what's a fascinating thing about us as a life form? We invent technology, but the human body does not change. So we constantly try to do research to make the human body fit into the technology. We rarely have technology developed for the human body.
Your vision during that profile?
Well, with the straining, I'd say dim and dim. It's good.
Though the human body remains the weak link in space travel, the scientists at the centrifuge are taking pilots one step closer to mastering the force of gravity. Who knows? Maybe the next G suit will be Another giant step for mankind. In the meantime, there's this.
Jelly Bulldog, that's right, you can smell blood. Oh, look at the blood out there. Roll that for me.
Holy moly. It was wonderful. Wonderful. Just, I'm coming back. That's all there is to it.